Sarah, for being here with us. This interview is going to be part of a work which is marking the 80th anniversary of the movie, and it's going to be entitled Gone with the Wind After Gone with the Wind. And our interview is going to be published in a special issue of Transatlantica. So I will be recording the video of our interview. So please, first, Sarah, I'd like you to take a few minutes to introduce yourself to our viewers today.
All right. Hello, my name is Sarah Elizabeth Combs. I live in the United States. Usually I'm in South Carolina, but I'm originally from California. I travel the world as a singer on a cruise ship. And I'm also trained in Broadway and musical theater. So that's my background and where I come from career-wise. So, and of course, now I'm home in quarantine. I'm actually in North Carolina as we speak, helping my sister with her newborn baby. We had to quarantine before the baby was born. So it's crazy. We're still down, in quarantine here.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So today we are June the 10th, and it's 7 p.m. My time, French time, and I was finishing up my series of questions about your video, a video that can be found on YouTube under the name Gone with the COVID. I was wondering if we might not create, or you might not want to create, another one that could probably bear the name of Gone with George Floyd, or maybe simply Gone, because actually this morning HBO Max made it official that it has pulled Gone with the Wind from its library of films. So this removal, of course, comes as mass protests sweep across the United States following the death of George Floyd. And the spokesperson for HBO Max said that Gone with the Wind is, I quote, a product of its time and depicts some of the ethnic and racial prejudices that have been commonplace in American society. And these racist depictions were wrong then and are wrong today. And we felt that to keep this title up without an explanation and a denouncement of those depictions would be irresponsible. So my question now would be, what is your reaction to this HBO Max announcement? Do you think that Gone with the Wind is indeed, if not gone with the COVID, gone with George Floyd?
I think that's a very good question and a really interesting title. I would say, thinking about it right now, as the timing of all of this brings me to realize for myself kind of the meaning of white privilege, because I grew up watching this film. It was one of my mother's favorite films, and I watched this film at a very young age, not aware at all of what it was depicting from the slavery standpoint. I enjoyed the movie because of the beautiful costumes, because of the performances, because of the story of Scarlett OHara and her resilience and her ridiculous character it's kind of like watching a train wreck, and you have to see what happens, how she gets through these times. So it's interesting to me that it's caused me to think about a film that I loved in a different light at this time. I think it's ironic that today also happens to be Hattie McDaniel's birthday, because I would be so curious to know what she would think. Her portrayal, in my opinion, is an incredible performance that she gave in that film, and she was the first African-American woman to win an Oscar, which I also find incredible in making that film. Now, that's not to say that the way that they were treated was right, and it wasn't the way that that things were depicted was not right. I know that they went to lengths in creating the film, to even take away a lot of what the novel portrayed. There was even worse things in the novel, portraying slavery. So I do know that even at that time in 1939, they were aware, but it wasn't where it should be, and it wasn't great. But yeah, in a way, it makes me sad because it's a film that I do enjoy, and I also think that there are some great performances by African American people in that film. But I, in no way, would condone slavery or the way that it was depicted in the film. But it's not something I think I really realized. And I think many people might not have realized what they were watching sometimes, until now.
Thank you, Sarah. So, believe it or not, Sarah, but your movie, even if only 7 minutes long, is actually, I don't know if you were aware, but it's the first ever remake of Gone with the Wind. And this is kind of a challenge, I think. This is a very daring enterprise here. So if we were to believe Dr. Pierre Berthommieux, who from a previous interview on the topic said that no studio would ever wish to embark on the adventure of a Gone with the Wind remake, since the movie is extremely controversial, the proof is today, and it would most certainly engender boycotts and protests and lose money. A Gone with the Wind remake, he said, would create a storm of criticisms about the South, its racial stereotypes, and the lost cause narrative, which is why no one would ever want to touch it. So this leads to my second question. Why did you choose to work with Gone with the Wind and not another Hollywood classic? Did you have other movies in mind before finally selecting Gone with the Wind? How did this idea come about?
Another great question. Thank you. It's funny that you asked that because I knew that the movie itself is controversial, and so I actually went to lengths to make sure to take out the controversial parts of the film in my I guess the so-called remake. But I actually would call my film a parody, and I wasn't thinking of it as a remake, although I'm flattered. But I did not want to evoke any emotions of the that are caused by the controversy of slavery, which is why I changed Mammy into Mommy, and also one funny little detail is that my mom has the movie ingrained in her head, and I made sure that she wanted to say things like in the black slang and stuff, but I was like, no, we cannot bring that up. You can't do that. You have to be very careful how things are portrayed. So I did take special care to not include that part of the story and keep it more about the character of Scarlett.
Okay, so would you like us to call it a parody, a tribute, an adaptation? What would be the right term?
A parody, for sure.
Parody,
for sure.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, and there were no other films that I had in mind actually until after I made this one, and then people were saying you should make another one. This one came about because my parents happened to run a bed and breakfast that in the South that is where I filmed, and it's a 1902 Southern mansion, plantation style, but it was never a plantation. So I happen to already have a set.
Okay, wonderful. So precisely talking about the creation of this remake, your video borrows some key elements from the original stories of the plantation home. Now I have your secret. I know where it comes from. Yeah. But you chose to insert specific passages that are emblematic, I would say, in the movie. So you have that passage where you see the sunrise, the porch scene, the staircase scene, the lacing of Scarlett's corset or Scarlett's green velvet curtain dress, and of course, Rhett's departure. So can you tell us what motivated this selection? I know you only have 7 minutes, and I know it must take a long time to create this video, but how do you select from the original movie or book these specific scenes?
Ooh, that's a good question. I might take a little bit of a long-winded answer on this one, because what made me think of this whole idea in the first place was, as an artist, I was watching all my other friends creating funny skits or songs or parodies, I thought, well, what could my contribution? I called it like my COVID contribution, because everybody's creating art and entertaining each other. And I saw on the show, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called Some Good News. John Krasinski had created this YouTube show that was just showing fun things that were happening, like good news during COVID, and giving people some respite from all of the sad things that were happening. So I thought, maybe I could do something like this. And they showed people standing next to their trash cans in different outfits, like taking out the rubbish, and dressed up. And I said, oh, I have a dress. And I did happen to have a Gone with the Wind. I had 2 Gone with the Wind dresses from Halloween and from another friend who gave me one. So I said, I could go out in my Scarlett dress. And then I said, wait a second, I have the house. Like, I could do a whole scene. And then the whole scene turned into a whole parody. So I chose, what I did is I kind of skimmed through the movie, and I picked scenes that I could relate to COVID-19. And I think that's what made it, the parody was that I chose things that people could find funny, because we're all going through the same situation. So and you think about it, and Scarlett is her going through the war. The war is kind of like our modern time COVID. I could kind of coincide these things. So it just kind of worked. And I also chose scenes that I had I already had a set for, like going down the stairs, although that was kind of a last minute thing, falling down the stairs. That just worked because we happened to have a beautiful staircase in the house, and the front porch, we had something that looked sort of similar to Tara or 12 Oaks. So I was just kind of using what I had and tried to make it work.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your little secrets.
So
watching your video, there's one scene in which Scarlett is seen singing, taking a selfie, filming herself. I'm not exactly sure what she's doing with her light pink cell phone. And in another scene, the traditional Southern carriage has been traded for the Mercedes, a brand that Scarlett's mentioned several times. So technologies and artifacts from our modern age have been incorporated into the script. So could you tell us more about these scenes? Because after watching these passages, my understanding of Scarlett is that of, maybe I'm going too far here, but a spoiled, lonely teenager. Is this your interpretation of Scarlett?
Yes, that's another great question. And it kind of goes back to making this parody relatable to now. I looked at it as, if you were to take the character of Scarlett OHara, who is this absolutely ridiculous, I mean, it's the best word I can come up with at the time, but she has so many layers, but especially as a teenager, she's a spoiled brat. And if you were to put her in this situation, how would she react? So it's like she's frozen in time, in Civil War time, but around her is modern time. So I slipped in things that could possibly work and be funny from modern time to work with the old dialogue, the old storyline.
Okay, gotcha. So Scarlett, in your filmed adaptation, is a single young lady. There's indeed no indication that she's married to Rhett. She's surrounded by her parents. She stays in the family home. And actually, Rhett Butler appears quite late in your adaptation and is not given much text. Even Ashley, Scarlett's lifelong infatuation, has been reduced to an image on her computer screen. So could you please explain the absence, or should I say the almost invisible presence of the Southern Beau figure from your remake? Is this intentional?
It's not intentional. It was just, it was convenience didn't allow for extra characters.
Okay.
I wish that I could have had more characters. And along the lines of bringing in a modern day props and things, I thought about even Scarlett Skyping with, say, the Tarleton twins at the beginning, and talking to them from that way, so that we introduce it as this is modernized Scarlett. But I was quarantined with my boyfriend and my parents, and that's all who were in the home at the time. So I worked with what I had. And my boyfriend is he's from Hungary. He's lives in Budapest, and he's staying with me. We were on the ship together, and we actually flew from Australia in March to my home, and then we quarantined there with my parents. So, and he's a dancer, not an actor, and so I tried to give him just enough so he could be the character, but he also helped film a lot of and edit the movie. Okay. So I wanted to have more characters, but time and resources were not as available. I also wanted to keep, when you're doing a parody and a comedy, shorter is better. So the more characters and the more scenes I introduced, the less comedy I think you could get from it. It would be too long.
Okay, gotcha. So now, moving 80 years forward and still talking about the creation of this video, your film this time incorporates clear references to the COVID-19 pandemic. The toilet paper reference, putting on weight, the Costco samples, Trump's stipend check, alcohol consumption. My question is, why did you want to incorporate those specific references into an old-time classic? After all, posterity might be better off not remembering the toilet paper shortage from 2020. So why did you want to have your viewers remember such things?
I think because I released it in the middle of COVID, it was not so much for posterity as it was for relatability and a good laugh at the time. However, maybe posterity, these things will hold on later. I mean, I'm thinking of prohibition or something like that. There's things that we remember, or people would remember from that time. I wasn't there that time, but in history, that details like that may live on. I don't know, but my intention was more for current time to be something, instead of mourning about, we're laughing about and relating. Because we're all in the same situation. Yeah. So that was the idea behind that.
Okay. So talking about the way we should remember Gone with the Wind 80 years later, I would have a question that might carry a feminist bias, but in the original story, Scarlett is strong-headed. As you said, she has many layers. She's manipulative, she's business savvy, she married 3 times, she has a daughter, she's afraid of no one and nothing. She works alone like no other to save Tara. She nurses soldiers, cares for Melanie, even if she resents it. And of course, I understand that your movie is only 7 minutes long and that not everything can fit into this parody. But in your adaptation, Scarlett's only obsession seems to be parties, dancing, and going shopping. So do you believe that the way you portrayed Scarlett represent the common 21st century understanding of a character? Or is this the way young ladies today would remember Scarlett?
I think not. I think that my portrayal of Scarlett was certainly the child stage of Scarlett, the early Scarlett, who was spoiled, who did only care about shopping and parties and things, but who I would also say throughout the film displayed those characteristics as well. I think even in the end of the movie, Rhett Butler turns to her and says something like, "My dear, you're such a child. You know, you think I can't remember the line, but by saying you're sorry that you can all change everything," or I'm misquoting it. But I think that my portrayal, in order to find the comedy, used the young Scarlett, the naive Scarlett, to go through this COVID situation, to see how she would react to it. But I don't think that's how she should be remembered, because there's, like we said, there's many layers to Scarlett, and that's why we, I think, watch the film, because we are not necessarily feeling for Scarlett, but we're feeling with Scarlett. We're going through all of these emotions, and we're watching her and who she becomes. So yeah, I really like that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, so we're now reaching the end of this interview, and knowing that you produced this video during a time of social distancing, so you told us that you used the location that you had, the costume that you found, and the characters that were with you in the house at the time. But what was the hardest about making this movie?
The hardest thing?
Yeah, the hardest thing, and probably also the best part about filming this movie.
Oh, by far, the hardest thing for me was going to Costco dressed in that outfit. And my boyfriend, bless his heart, filming me going through Costco. Because we weren't sure how it was going to, what the reaction would be, but I was very surprised that people didn't seem to react too much. There were only 2 or 3 people that really said anything. Mm-hmm. And one of the ladies, you can hear her laughing, and she was loving it. And she happened to be African American as well, which I was shocked. Like, I was happy to see that there are people in the community that do appreciate the film too. And I know that like we said, it's controversial and everything, but that also made me feel safer, that it wasn't such a terrible thing to portray. And of course I tried to get through the store as quickly as possible, so I wasn't making a fool of myself. But the most fun, or the best thing about filming, it was my first endeavor, so I learned a lot, and I would say it brought me and my parents and my boyfriend closer. We worked very hard on the editing side. We'd never done that before, so he was learning as we went along. We might have had a few arguments along the way, but but we worked together, and we had a project, an end result that I would say we have something to remember this whole experience with. So that was probably the best thing. And that also, it brought many people a lot of joy and a lot of laughs. I had even a COVID-19 patient write to me and say, "Thank you so much for bringing joy back into my house. I've been sick, and this brightened my day, and I'm going to watch it over and over again." So I'm glad that Scarlett's antics can give people a laugh even now.